CSS animation. Now that you learned 2D transform and 3D transform, and you also learned about transitions, it's time to apply some animations. Now let's take an example of few simple animations to get us started and understand how this is done. Now, as you can see, I've created three different divs and I've separated them with a horizontal line. Each one of them has an individual class. The top one being a blue colored div, then the red colored, and then I have a div which is having rounded edges, a shadow, and an orange color to it, and some text inside of it. So let's look at these one by one. So for top one is known as it's having a class called sample animation. Let's look at it. This is how you define this is how you define animations inside of CSS. So firstly, you have to design keyframes. Now remember, an animation is an effect which is generated by having multiple images which are like moving images. There is a slight difference between each one of them. Just like a movie strip, when they move at a certain speed, it feels like you're looking at something very real that is moving. But when you watch a movie in a theater, it is actually a number of frames that are passing every second. And that's exactly in every video that you look even online. So you're able to extract frames. So you're able to pause on a particular frame and modify it or extract it. The same way in animations, you have frames. So you have to define keyframes. Keyframes, that is, there's a keyword called @ keyframes. That's how we define it. And give a name to it. This could be any name you want. Please make sure that you start your name with animation name with an alphabet and it does not have any spaces and avoid having special characters in it. So I've created this simple animation known as simple animation. And I've given it two declarations inside the scope. One is from and the other is to, which actually denotes what should the animation begin with and where should it end. So in the from part, I have set a background color to this particular element, given it a fixed width, that is 100 pixels. Then in two part, I've given it a different background color and I have given a width to it that is set to 100%. Definitely 100% width would be way much longer than uh, the 100 pixels, depending on our devices. All right. And right next to that, I have defined the simple class where we have given the background color, the finite width and height to this particular div, which is having a blue background. Now, how to set an animation to it is simple. You have to declare the animation name with a property animation name, and then add the name over here, and then add the animation duration. That is how long do you want the animation to last. So the animation can last for let's say 10 seconds, which will make it very slow. And as you can see, the moment I make that change, the animation becomes very slow. Or I can make it really quick. Let's try to shrink it down to 2 seconds and it becomes really fast. So restoring it back to 4 seconds now. Apart from animation duration, you have one more property which is known as animation delay. And animation delay is basically how late do you want to start the animation after the element has loaded into the render, after it has been rendered on the page. So let's say I decide to have a 5 second delay after loading the page. And immediately you see it waits for 5 seconds, 5 whole seconds before starting the animation. You can test this out by refreshing the screen. Once I refresh, it's going to wait for 5 seconds and then start the animation all over again. Now, similarly, if you can see, you also have more settings that you can try out. Number one of them is basically animation direction. So you can also have a reverse animation, and with a delay when it starts, it abruptly starts from the end and reverses back down over here. This is how animations can be reversed. Now, in this particular case, the reverse animation is not very appealing to look at, and I'm going to remove the delay because we are quickly testing out effects. Similar, you have a property known as animation iteration count. So what iteration count does is it gives you how many times the animations have to be run. So let's say I give it 3 times and I save the document. Now if you see the animation repeats once, twice, and thrice. And right after 3 times, it will stop completely. If you wanted to run infinite number of times, you can use infinite. Now looking at this bar over here, which is very huge, it sounds very useless to have this repeating. But imagine this has been minified into a tiny box, and maybe that's an effect you want as an animation. That could do the trick for you. Several animations on different websites are created using such settings in CSS instead of creating GIF images because sometimes loading more and more images is much difficult and it's easier to render code on the screen. But this could take a toll on the GPU of your system, so you have to be careful exactly how many animations you want to have. Do you want to have too many tiny animations, etc.? This could be resource intensive at times. So moving on, let's look at the next animation. And over here, you can see instead of having to and from, I have created a percentile map for the animation. That is for the next red box over here. And in this case, I've given it some animation frames where the background color is changing between red, pink, yellow, purple, blue, olive, and brown. And this has been applied to this particular class that is color shifter box, which has a finite width, and a it has a finite width, and it also has a finite height. And the color shifter box is right here. Let's apply the animation to the color shifter box. So first of all, I'm going to place the animation name over here. Animation would be color shift and animation duration. And as you can see, the moment I added the animation name, the effect does not take place because I have not given a duration for it. So you need to have a duration to be set for how long the animation should run. And the color shift is happening pretty quickly for 5 seconds. If I set it to 10 seconds, you can see the color shift happens very slowly and gradually, which is much more smooth to look at. And it appears to have ended now. You can also mark this as infinite. Let's do that. Let's give it an infinite duration. And also let's reduce the seconds over here to 5 seconds. It's happening fast, but it keeps on repeating itself. The background color, width, and heights are not the only properties which you can play with, but also the 2D and 3D transformations that we learned about. The next example which I've created is this little div, which is the little spin box, which has a text test written inside of it. And it has this tomato orange color set to it at the background. Here it is. And the animation that I created for this is simple, where I've given some translations, where it moves on the X plane, then on the Y plane, and then again it rotates at the same time, which it does, and stops at 100. Then I'm going to set the animation to this and set it to infinite. Let's look at the effect. And as you can see, this feels like the box is moving around the axis as designed. So animations could be slightly tricky to understand, but if you have practiced your translations and other properties properly, you just have to focus on creating these keyframes and applying them correctly. It just takes a little practice to perfect the skill. Thank you.